Hello everyone and welcome to an episode of Unreleased Games. Akira, if you do not know, is a Japanese manga series set in a post-apocalyptic Neo-Tokyo, which was made popular in 1982. It was then published in English by Marvel Comics' imprint, Epic Comics. It was considered one of the first mangas to be translated in its entirety in English. As its popularity skyrocketed in both Japan and the United States, a film adaptation was made in 1988 and was an instant classic among anime and manga fans alike. Saying you haven't seen Akira at this point is kinda like saying you haven't seen Scarface. This movie is an absolute must, whether you're an anime fan or not. But I'm not here to lecture you on the origins of Akira. Before we begin, let's state that there is in fact a retail released NES and Amiga version of Akira that has been released in the past. The NES version released only in Japan and was generally not received well with fans, mainly because this was heavily based text game and not much of a game within itself. But for what it's worth, the 8-bit renditions of the game are pretty awesome. Now, according to the sources, the original developer of the game was Black Pearl Studios, headed by Larry Siegel. Larry Siegel was an Atari employee before leaving Atari and creating his own studio, Black Pearl. After establishing his own company, he took a trip to Japan to get the rights to a game he was interested in developing, Akira. He managed to obtain the rights and then transfer the rights to THQ during the later stages of development, who would then absorb Black Pearl as a company. Now, this is before THQ made its name famous from games such as Red Faction, Saints Row, and the plethora of sports games. It was put in charge of the video game adaptation of Akira for the SNES, Sega Genesis, Sega CD, Game Boy, and Game Gear. Akira was officially announced in 1993 through a magazine called Game Zone. Issue number 14 on December 1993 would be the first and only time we would see images of this mysterious game. Unfortunately, this issue left fans with more questions than answers. Inside were images of the Genesis, SNES, Game Boy, Game Gear, and Sega CD versions of the game. It detailed how the game would play and teased the different formats the game would have taken. It gave us a preview of a first-person shooter section, a top-view road rash style driving section, side-scrolling beat-em-up, and a traditional adventure mode. Now, I must give credit to Hardcore Gaming 101 for taking the time and effort for tracking down the game's former developers and getting answers for us all. According to his interview with THQ employee Jim Gregory, the game was supposed to hit all the major sequences of the film. According to him, one of the biggest challenges was meeting the demands of the license itself, meaning that the license owners needed to approve of said project before giving it the green light. And with Akira being the big flashy movie adaptation that it was, the game was expected to do the same. This was, however, very difficult for the time. The 18-bit graphical limitations, THQ had to use what was referred to as bootleg amateur systems in order to get a handle for the SNES architecture. An unnamed experienced developer was hired to handle the Mode 7 sequences in the motorcycle levels in order to give the game a pseudo 3D effect. The visual was all there, but the plan was to make the game look and play like a bigger and better game. It was also confirmed that the 16-bit version of the Akira score was made, but could not be used due to the separate licensing issues. This is very unfortunate because I can only imagine how that would have sounded like in the SNES and Genesis's excellent sound chip technology. Now, while there isn't one specific character that it focused on, it seemed like the ads wanted the focus to surround Kaneda, even though you played several different characters from the anime throughout the entire game. This is where testimony from a few individuals have surfaced who were there to play the game when it was available to play at the CES convention in 1994. We'll get to that later on. It seems as though each version of this game was handed to a different studio. The SNES version was handed over to the Handmade Software in Swindon, UK. The Game Boy version was handed to Ice Software in Slough, UK, with all the Sega console adaptations being taken care of by THQ themselves in Chicago. So with all these developers being involved, why was it cancelled? While Jim Gregory confirms that it wasn't in fact cancelled as it fell more into neglect. This is when Larry transferred the rights to THQ and they couldn't get into agreement with the project managers towards the game's elements. They just didn't understand the Super Nintendo's limitations, and soon the lead programmers left and other projects became the priority. In the interview, Jim Gregory did away with any false rumors surfacing about people having a ROM of this game, but stating that parts of this game were in fact completed but were never put on a cartridge or disc. Only work-in-progress versions were sent by modem to THQ. He even recalls the Game Boy version not even being an original game, but rather an Akira reskin of an already existing ICE software game that they already worked on. In an interview with Tom Meege from Black Pearl, he stated that the Genesis version was the version that came along the farthest and was being built in their Chicago offices. They were also creating the Game Gear version with an original design being created for that specific console. The Game Gear version was a side-scroller with levels connected together by Tetsuo on his bike and a basic storyline. The programmer at the time took another job and the project took a halt. They were about 30% done when the project was completely abandoned. It was also confirmed that the Game Gear version was in fact destroyed. In a separate interview with Ryan Arnold from THQ, he states that the THQ Game Vault contains no prototypes beyond the PlayStation era of 1998, and continues by stating that there aren't many employees left from the original Super Nintendo days. An interesting description of the Sega Genesis version by Whimsical Phil from the NeoGAF forum was posted a while back. Whimsical Phil, who is also known as journalist Phil Theobald, surfaced, but people weren't too sure if what the journalist was saying was actually true. Surely enough, as bits and pieces of information surfaced, it became clear that everything he detailed matched the screenshots and videos that were brought to light. This is the only credible source for the gameplay of the Genesis version that we ever got. He describes a motorcycle racing stage similar to Super Hang-On, a first-person shooter stage where you played as Tetsuo exploring the lab where he was being experimented on. He used a psychic blast to attack and was stated as being very impressive looking for the Genesis. There was also a side-scrolling stage where you played as Kaneda and Kai piloting the hover vehicle through the sewers. An isometric stage where you played as Tetsuo attacking soldiers on the bridge, and the last stage available to play was a 2D side-scroller beat-em-up where you were attacking a mutated Tetsuo similar to the end of the movie. Now, footage of this game were lost in time due to the lack of source information, and people just didn't have the same technology that we have today to share information. That is until December of 2013 when a YouTuber by the name of Poop Ninja 3 uploaded a video featuring footage of the 1994 CES show from Chicago. This video is extremely interesting, and not only does it show the only known footage to exist of Akira being played on the Genesis, but also other interesting games as well that never happened. Some of these games are Mega Man for the Sega Genesis, and a very peculiar version of Final Fantasy. Maybe I'll talk about that another day. But anyways, I spoke to him and asked his permission to use the footage. The video is extremely long, but the part showing off Akira is only about 20 seconds long. As you can see, the graphics and colors look quite impressive. Unfortunately, the game seemed to crash towards the end of the gameplay. And as you can see, the kiosk states all the consoles it would have been released for. I asked him how he came across his VHS, and he stated that he purchased it through an ad in Die Hard magazine back in the day. Now, up until November of 2015, that was the only footage known to exist of Akira being played. I contacted Unseen64's writer Momokoma, who has in his possession this interactive entertainment promotional CD of upcoming titles of that year. The short clip features all of the game's different level layouts, and oddly enough the layouts all match the description stated by Whimsical Phil at NeoGAF forums.
Akira by THQ is based on the incredibly popular Japanese animated film and comic books that may well be the definitive anime title. This 10-level adventure game has got an incredible combination of gameplay, with fighting, driving, first-person role-playing, side-scrolling action, and three-quarters view adventure. If you're a fan of the series, or if you just like good adventure games, Akira's the game for you.
So in conclusion, we need a definite answer as to why this game was completely abandoned. The answer, according to Jim Gregory, was Larry Siegel just wasn't very impressed with the outcome of the Akira development and was overall disappointed with development. It was a very ambitious title with expectations that far exceeded the capabilities of the 16-bit era. Simply put, it was a project way ahead of its time. When asked if there were any leftover assets of the game, he simply stated that they were lost in time. It did have lots of animations on an old disc, but they cannot read it. Now, I'm not sure if that means that they can't physically read it, or they aren't allowed to read it. In any case, thank you guys for watching. Hit that like button if you enjoyed the video, and I will see you all next time.